Why is infertility seemingly so common today?
I think the thing that comes to most people's mind is hormonal levels, but I'm a big advocate for also looking at anatomy. I think that often gets missed. And then, yes, there are also environmental factors and things like untreated infections that could lead to scar tissue and things that happen more acutely.
So, diabetes, high insulin, those things affect fertility as well? I had no idea that was true.
For irritable bowel syndrome is what they were studying, and it beat any sort of medication for it that's on the market.
It just seems like over the years, acupuncture is becoming more and more accepted in mainstream medicine.
Some of the ways that I think of how I'm helping women and helping fertility is it will, on an fMRI, certain acupuncture points done in a specific way will shut the brain down.
Infertility. Why do so many women struggle with it today? Is there a single reason, or are there a variety of factors at play? Our guest today will provide some valuable insights into these questions and others. She's a licensed acupuncturist and holistic fertility educator. She has her own clinic in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Please welcome Nicole Lange. Nicole, great to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Mike. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I am too. This is a big topic. We've had a lot of requests for, from our listeners and viewers to cover it, and we intend to explore it some more in the future. And I'm really glad you're here. And I want to start just by asking you, why is infertility seemingly so common today?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've been doing this for 20 years, and when I started, the statistic was 1 in 9 couples, and then it was 1 in 8, and now lately it's been 1 in 6 couples. So it's hard to say. I think you alluded to like it's so multifaceted, and one of the aspects is accessibility to diagnostics and care where people are seeking it out. And so I think there's lots and lots of reasons from environmental to stress levels to di- diagnoses going up. So yeah, it's all a big constellation.
Yeah. So you said accessibility to diagnostics. Is that really just like general, maintenance checkups, making sure everything is working with people's organs, or like what do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, so I think the thing that comes to most people's mind is hormonal levels, but I'm a big advocate for also looking at anatomy. I think that often gets missed. And so we're seeing a lot more accessibility to the hormone panels. You can get those from a lot of different providers now. You can get them through online sources and order them yourselves. But the so that makes that part of the equation more accessible to more people. There's home semen analyses and things like that that you can do some basic workup. But then there's the anatomy piece, and I think there's more awareness. There's still not nearly enough, but looking for things like inflammation and scar tissue and growths and things like that that can be just as big as hormonal imbalances, if not bigger. So we're trending in the right direction slowly. Of course, we've treated fertility different than we've treated most other biophysical issues. We treat it more like psychology or cosmetic kind of things historically. And of course, it's not. It's really not a personal choice. It's a medical condition when things like this are at play.
Do you think the anatomy part of it is largely genetic, or is it
Mhm.
lifestyle driven? You mentioned inflammation,
Yeah.
scar tissue, things that happen
Yeah.
obviously after we're born.
Yeah.
Break that down for us.
Yeah, you're asking so many good, complicated questions right off the bat. I love this. Yeah, I mean, I heard you talking about epigenetics on one of your prior shows. So, I mean, there are things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, like endometriosis. These are increasingly known as what's called polygenetic disorders. So it's not just one gene that you can pinpoint and say, aha, that person has this gene, therefore they're going to have endometriosis. It's these sort of like multiple genes that can switch on or off and make this happen in people. And these same genes are linked to other types of issues. So in the case of like polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a syndrome where people are often struggling with very irregular or missing ovulation and cycles. That is linked to a lot of metabolic issues and insulin resistance. And so there's all sorts of, gut and weight and fatigue issues that tie into that. And they're all linked to the same complicated genetics. And in the case of endometriosis, same thing. There's tons of inflammatory bowel overlap, inflammation, and just general health and pain tolerances, pain levels. And so, yeah, it's really complicated. And so these things can be turned on and off by different experiences, both in our lives and in our parents' lives, our grandparents' lives we're seeing with epigenetics. And then, yes, there are also environmental factors and things like untreated infections that could lead to scar tissue and things that happen more acutely. So it's a really big thing to explore, which makes it daunting, but it can be really important if these are factors that are at play.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'm blown away that you mentioned insulin resistance and
Yeah.
how blood sugar irregularities just branch into like every corner of our bodies, whether it's, um, uh, you know, uh, uh, cardiovascular issues and problems with the vascular system and just the different things that happen from diabetics and pre-diabetic people that have to deal with those conditions. So so diabetes, high insulin, those things affect fertility as well. I had no idea that was true.
Yeah, this
Wow.
is, I mean, we used to just think, so polycystic ovarian syndrome, again, irregular or missing ovulation, higher levels of male hormones, and let's see, what is cystic looking ovary. So if you look at an ovary on a scan, it looks like a chocolate chip cookie, lots and lots and lots of follicles.
Mhm.
They're not actually cysts, they're the little pods that hold the eggs. So if you have two out of three of those things, you have polycystic ovarian syndrome. And for many years, it was just, oh, we have to get your ovaries to ovulate. We need to get rid of these male hormones. But it turns out that a lot of the sort of, if you look upstream from these overt ovarian issues, it really is very much about this insulin resistance and excess glucose and insulin staying in the bloodstream that can't get into the cells to feed them. And then it goes down and interacts with the ovarian cells. It gets converted into male hormones, which then
Wow.
disrupt the endocrine feedback loops. The body gets confused. Where are we in the cycle? What's happening? Because these hormones are in levels that shouldn't be there. And so that is actually what's throwing off then the hypothalamus doesn't know where it is because these hormone levels are irregular from what it would textbook want to see to kick in the hormones to make a person ovulate. So you, if you get to the root of the insulin resistance and the blood sugar, then there's nothing to convert into these other hormones, and then there's nothing to confuse the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, and all of a sudden you've got someone who can ovulate again and can have more chances of conception per year because their cycles are more regular.
So it's like an instant cure
Yeah, it's
in that
huge. And
instance. Yeah.
and like and we have all these increasingly cool ways to work on blood sugar. We
Mhm.
have hormone or our own glucose monitors that we can wear. We have GLP-1s, we have different kinds of things in treatments that are really great for fertility. We've heard of Ozempic babies. This really explains the cases where that would be the most common.
Is all those things that you're sharing, all those different methods make the blood sugar regulation picture easier to change?
Yeah, so anything that you can do. So things, DIY things like exercising for just a
Mhm.
few minutes around your biggest meals, stabilizing blood sugar surges so it's more steady. There's so much information on ways that you can just stabilize your blood sugar so it's not spiking and
Yeah.
dropping and converting. So anything like that. And then we have medications like metformin. What metformin does is it upregulates the pathways to get insulin and sugar into the cells in the body, so it's not just floating around in the bloodstream and going to the ovaries and getting converted. And then GLP-1s are doing that same thing, plus a couple of other mechanisms is slowing down the sugar coming into the bloodstream. It's decreasing the cravings for it. And so that all of these are ways to work on fertility.
Wow. So fertility, was it infertility like less of an issue a generation ago? You touched earlier on lifestyle, and I want to explore that a little bit, unpack
Yeah.
that. Do you think our contemporary lifestyles play a part in overall fertility rates today?
I don't see how they couldn't. I think we're
Hmm.
slow on the actual hard science of it, but I think that there is just an increased pace of life. I know sleep is a big topic for you. Poor sleep, lots of cortisol levels, that, unrelenting stress cycles. And something that I'm passionate about is I talk about infertility versus fertility. 25% of what I like to focus on with people is making sure we're figuring out infertility. Do you have these anatomical things? Do you have these hormonal imbalances? We really want to get to the heart of those things. But then if that's done in a sort of vacuum of where the rest of the person is increasingly in fight or flight and high threat, often because they want to have a baby and they're not getting pregnant, then it becomes a chicken and an egg situation where we do the best treatment for troubleshooting the infertility, but we're robbing the fertility. And so we're robbing the felt safety, we're robbing the feeling abundant and resourced enough to commit to implantation and a pregnancy and all of that. So I'm a big advocate for all of the above. And I think the modern lifestyle really harms fertility. I think the infertility piece is probably more standard across the generations, but the lack of fertility is a
Yeah.
big piece in modern culture.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it
Yeah.
anyway. When you address lifestyle issues and people's fertility improves, particularly we're talking about women here, that's kind of the focus of the conversation. Do their other health issues just start to go away?
Yeah. That's what I
Yeah,
love
I
about what
figured.
I do.
Yeah.
It's not one thing at the expense of the other. I have an analogy that I use that is your reproductive bits and pieces, your infertility, if that's a factor, is like a nursery. And the rest of your body and mind are like the house. The rest of your life is like the neighborhood. And
Yeah.
then your actual like felt safety and what's called neuroception in psychology, where you feel like you're not threatened all the time, is your foundation. And
Mhm.
so if we go after nursery, 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 and everything else is falling apart, we're making that treatment more uphill than it needs to be. We're harming the quality of life, we're harming relationships. Versus if we have that awareness that, like, yes, we may need to troubleshoot that nursery, but we're going to do it with also taking care of the kitchen and the bedroom and
Yeah.
not fighting with the nearest neighbors and feeling like our foundation is really strong and really stable. All of a sudden, things work faster, things work better, and everything else is getting better along the way. So
Yeah.
it's such a joy to practice in this way.
Yeah. It is. I mean, I can definitely relate to that in the sense that, I've been doing more regular like liver cleanses over the past couple of years, just as a detox protocol, nothing specific, just to, just try to get better as I get older, or
Yeah.
get better. I should rephrase that, to maintain my health as I get older.
Realistic expectations.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, hey, thank God. I mean, I'm doing great, but I just noticed several allergies went away, like seasonal allergies. I haven't dealt with them in a couple of years now, where I had them. They were terrible all the time. Just different um, just different like minor gut issues I had before seem to be falling to the wayside. And it's just amazing how when you address, the root cause, the underlying, everything else just kind of falls into place. Um, the body wants to be balanced in every way. That's always going to be its disposition to try to find that. So when you get those obstacles out of the way, those lifestyle factors, the bad diet, the excessive carbs, the poor sleep, lack of exercise, things just start coming together, you know?
And I think things like feeling intentional and having tools and feeling empowered and feeling like you're, even as a ritual. I love these softer topics that, in the past have been like, well, maybe that's woo woo, or maybe that's placebo, or maybe that's, but it's like,
Yeah.
well, let's look at what is placebo. Placebo is neurochemicals influencing your circulation, influencing your immune system. And there's the sort of opposite side, which is nocebo, where it's like something is actually harming you because it
Hmm.
feels threatening, it feels stressful, it feels overwhelming. And so we can make choices in our life, in our day-to-day lifestyle choices that influence placebo and amplify the actual treatment. So it's like if you can do a treatment that's in and of itself good, like acupuncture, and then you can amplify it with placebo, why wouldn't I want to do that? Like, I
Yeah.
think that's just your body's natural pharmacy being released and put on top of something.
Yeah.
So I love that Harvard is studying, there's a acupuncturist at Harvard that's studying placebo and how to put it into good medicine and make it even better. And so it's just like we're finally getting there where we're connecting the mind and the body and not poo-pooing the mind piece,
Yeah.
which is great.
I love that. Send me some placebo. I'm
Yeah,
down for that.
I will. I mean, who wouldn't want to get better with just like thinking
Yeah.
about something? There's this one study that I love in particular where they did, it was with acupuncture. So they did, you're on a wait list, you're going to get standard acupuncture, just hop up on the table. We're going to do this acupuncture on you, or we're going to do what the researchers called, schmaltzy care acupuncture, where they stopped, they really listened.
Mhm.
At one point in the protocol, they had to like stop and think about it as to look like they were really like, okay, okay, yeah, I know what I'm going to do here. And then they would explain the points and maybe touch where they were going to do the needling. And that treatment was way better than just the acupuncture, and it
Wow.
it rivaled, I think it beat it was for irritable bowel syndrome is what they were studying, and it beat any sort of medication for it that's on the market. And it's like, and they weren't, I think they were doing sham acupuncture, so it wasn't acupuncture even, it was just
Hmm.
the placebo, it was a
Hmm.
placebo study. And you don't have to trick people either with the placebo. So they're doing open label placebo studies where they say, we think placebo is legit medicine. We're going to give you sugar pill. We're going to explain why we think this is going to do something and see if it does. It still works.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
Yeah, that is. So you're an acupuncturist.
Mhm.
You have been studying acupuncture. I mean, you've studied acupuncture. You're a licensed acupuncturist. It's seems like it's a real cornerstone of your practice.
Yeah.
And just over the years, I've met a lot of different acupuncturists that had their own practices, and I've been on this natural medicine path for, man, I want to say almost a couple of decades now. And it just seems like over the years, acupuncture is becoming more and more accepted in mainstream medicine. You just touched earlier on an acupuncturist. I think that is at Harvard,
Hmm.
right? That's what you're.
Yep.
Yeah,
Ted
studying.
Kapchuk. Yep.
Yeah,
Ted Kapchuk is his
yeah.
name. Yeah.
Right. And I know acupuncturists who have offices in hospitals now, and they're working
Mhm.
in fertility medicine along with all the other specialists in those fields. And I think that's wild. It's
Yeah.
really being embraced as an effective modality for
Yes.
fertility issues. How does it help women?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I'll say I love that we are getting our foot in the door. Like I did my internship 21 years ago in a hospital, inpatient, like seeing in hospital patients, which was very advanced at the time, and now it's more and more common. What I think, what how it helps women. I mean, I could give you the science answer. I could give you the Chinese medicine answer. I'll kind of try to combine them both. So I think of acupuncture like little thermostats all over the body. And originally it was observation based, experiential. So there's 400-ish points that we learn when we get our master's degrees or doctorate degrees in the United States. And we memorize these are the thermostats for this. And then we listen and we see what the person's issues are and we pick the right thermostats for them. So I say it's kind of like if you'd been in a modern building or you'd never been in a modern building rather, and somebody locked you in one, you would figure out very quickly a light switch without understanding electricity. You'd just be like, okay, that obviously does that. Thermostat's a little bit trickier. But through the history of Chinese medicine, they tried these thermostats and watched what happened. And they didn't have to understand how it helps women or how it helps anything, and they just see it does. And so the theory at the time, and still in many places, is that it circulates chi or energy, and it gets things freed up, and it can help the body digest better and process things better and eliminate better, and then everything works better. So now we're living in this really cool time where I think we can look with fMRIs, we can look with EEGs, we can look with Doppler studies of blood flow, and we can start to see what is some of the underlying ductwork behind the thermostat and the furnace. And so, like, some of the ways that I think of how I'm helping women and helping fertility is it will, on an fMRI, certain acupuncture points done in a specific way will shut the brain down on an fMRI where it goes from all lit up and thinking and logical to black.
Mhm.
And so I say it's like closing all the tabs on your nervous system. And then the places that stay lit up, if you look at them and you look at what type of brain waves are persisting, they're shifting from the kind of brain waves that people come through the door in, which are the type of brain waves that adults tend to live in. It's GABA and beta, and then it switches into alpha and theta, which is what kids and really good meditators can hang out in. And
Mhm.
so that does things, makes ripples for nervous system. Then you go down and you look, let's do a Doppler study on the pelvic blood flow. We can flip a switch on an ultrasound and see how smooth and consistent the blood flow is going to the ovaries and the uterus. Of course, that's delivering all sorts of hormones and nutrients and oxygen, and it's more smooth and consistent with certain treatments with acupuncture. And so that's how we get in the door, is we can show we improve outcomes, and there is this underlying ductwork. And we can look at now stem cell generation, we can look at interleukin levels and cytokine changes, we can look at all these different things that are so cool and legit.
Yeah. I love there's always been a certain level of mystery to
Mhm.
acupuncture, especially if you're looking at it through Western eyes, because
Yeah.
Eastern medicine is just so different and just on a different plane. And in a lot of ways ahead of what the West is doing, as advanced as the West is with their, scans and innovations and equipment and surgeries and all those necessary things.
Yep.
There's still something about just the traditional medicine and its role in the whole medicine picture. Um,
Oh, but you were saying like Western medicine in some ways is behind, and I think it's really fascinating. So one of the things that I can nerd out about is that so we have all these traditional medicines, Chinese medicine being one of them, Ayurveda, indigenous medicines, and then around the mid 1500s we get the scientific revolution. So the scientific revolution in Europe, all of a sudden we're looking smaller and smaller. So we're dissecting for the first time, we're measuring, we're quantifying, we're looking, and we get all these tremendous advances that save lives and increase life expectancy. So things, ways to treat infections, ways to help if you're having an anaphylactic reaction, ways to set broken bones, ways to, do blood transfusions, all these really cool things. But what happened in that is we split the mind and the body, and we split all the systems up. And then we started looking smaller and smaller. So what Chinese medicine has, which is really cool, is that it never did that. And so now, fast forward several hundred years later, we're to this point where we're like, of course the mind and the ovaries are connected. Of
yeah.
course your immune system and your gut are interrelated. Of course your mood and your, you name it, are interrelated, how you heal. And so when we take Western medicine and we have this reductionistic piecemeal, like your heart thing, sometimes you need an ablation if you have a heart arrhythmia because
Yeah.
the electrical thing is kind of off kilter and you need to
Mm.
fix that. Western medicine is really good at that. But people increasingly see the value and want whole person interconnected. And so if you put back in this thing that's kind of been poo-pooed as old school, and we see, oh no, it actually just connects the mind and body and all the systems again. Now all of a sudden you have the best of both worlds, and
Mm.
you have science supporting both of them, and you have patients that can see the validity and not having to like choose and be polarized about it, which was honestly how it was when I started. It was like, do you like natural medicine or do you like mainstream medicine? Which camp are you in? It's like
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. Yeah,
Follow.
exactly. Yep. Um, I went to an acupuncturist years ago. I've been to several in my lifetime, and you were talking about the alpha and the beta waves, and I remember he had this thing where he would take like a tissue and he would just drop some lavender oil on it and put it over
Mhm.
my face,
Yeah.
and it was like a sedative. Like, it
That's
was I felt
horrible.
like a new man after like 20 minutes. It was unreal. And then,
Yeah.
he did all the needle placements and, left me to be, but just that lavender oil and just taking that in, and how that I know, I'm like you, I like to geek out. So I went and read how lavender oil alters brain waves because of its properties when you smell it. And it's just amazing, and I felt like that just took it to another level, and it's amazing how you can just combine acupuncture with these different strategies just to enhance its effectiveness.
Yeah, amplify. I love that example. That's so good. And yeah,
Mhm.
so and this ties back to our placebo conversation. There's also an element of conditioning and training your brain to like when I'm about to reset my nervous system with the needles, the actual needles, and I have this tissue with the lavender on, which does something in and of itself. Then you put them together,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden there's this anticipation and this like sort of prior lived experience of like, okay, this is what I smell when my nervous system does this. So they've done studies where they'll do, for example, like smell peppermint oil and take a pain medication, and eventually people can just smell the peppermint and have pain relief, and it is quantifiable in their inflammatory measurements in their bloodstreams. So
Wow.
one of the things that I do in my practice is I use aromatherapy, not because it's in any specific scent is magic, but because they can build that association.
Mm.
And then pressure on the eyes. I do an eye pillow. That pressure on the eyes actually stimulates the vagus nerve bundle, which tells your heart to slow down. I was saying this to a person whose wife was with her, and her wife was like, "Oh, I know that." And I was like, "How do you know that already? That's cool." And she's like, my cardiologist told me about it because I have a heart arrhythmia. And when I can feel my heart going out of rhythm, I'm supposed to really push on my eyeballs,
Yeah.
firmly but gently, and see if I can get it to settle down before I take the medication that I take next.
Mhm.
And I was like, gosh, how cool is this that it's all
Yeah.
coming together?
Yeah, isn't that great? So there's an eye pillow you can get, because I do that sometimes. I
Yeah.
just push my eyes with my palms,
Mhm, mhm.
and I mean, it feels amazing, but how does that work?
So it's just a weighted, I just noticed, and I mean, this is very Chinese medicine. I just noticed when I went to yoga classes and they had the little weighted eye pillows for the end, for the shavasana where you lay down, my favorite part, lots of people's favorite parts, I could relax better with the eye pillow, even if the room was dark. And so I was like, "Well, I just like that. That feels good. I'm going to start
Yeah.
doing that in my practice." And then I moved into my clinic 10 years ago and I had windows in my rooms for the first time. And I'm like, okay, now I need it from a light perspective. And then eventually I was like, "Why do I like it?" And I started looking like you did with the lavender, and it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that
Yeah.
makes sense scientifically." And so, yeah, now even though one of my rooms doesn't have windows, I still do it in there. And yeah, the heavier the pillow, I know they make some that like don't press on your eyes for
Mhm.
eyelash extensions or whatever, but
Mhm.
I like the nice heavy ones that are filled with like buckwheat or something heavy that you can really feel it on your eyes.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah.
That really stimulates the parasympathetic nervous
Mhm,
system.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so, like, neuroception says your body is scanning 4 times a second for, "Am I safe?" And one of the things it's doing is it's checking your internal organs, like, what is your heart rate? So if your heart rate is slower because you told it to go slower because you breathed lavender oil or you pressed on your eyeballs or you got acupuncture, that is one way that you can tell your body it's safe. And so even if you're in a stressful situation, all of a sudden you have sort of bypassed that circuitry and given it a different input that makes it feel a little bit more safe. And then it can handle and make choices and know what to do in that sort of threatening in a different way situation, like fertility.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a friend. This is not fertility related, but he will not do acupuncture because he does not like the needles. Just the thought
Yes.
of it nauseates him, and he says he has no interest.
Poor guy.
And yeah, but you have an alternative from what I understand. You have stick-on beads. Is
Yeah, there are
that
stick-on beads. There are also these stick-on needles that are literally 1.5 millimeters or like wisps of needles. But yeah, there are beads, there are seeds. Historically, they would use seeds from plants, which would have, of course, the pressure of them digging in, but the oil from the seed itself can cause a little irritation and stimulation to the point. Again, it's like 400 little thermostats, and you can stimulate a thermostat in different ways. So you can do tens units and do it with electricity. You can do it with acupressure and use your hands or devices and seeds and beads. You can use electrostim through needles. You can use needles. So there's no one way to do anything. Sometimes people see the studies on fertility and are desperate to increase, say, their IVF embryo transfer success, and they're like, oh, this makes me want to throw up. It makes me want to pass
yeah.
out, but I want you to treat me on my embryo transfer day. And I'm like, hold on, hold on, hold on.
Mhm.
Let's see. Do we have time to try it once and see if you actually like it? A lot of people who think that end up loving it once they feel it because it's so different and it does such cool things to the nervous system. But if they don't have time to try it, or they're really like so averse to it that they don't want to try it, I respect that. And then I'm like, let's talk about my acupressure guide. Let's
Yeah.
talk about getting a massage instead the night before. Let's talk about all the different ways you can do similar things in different ways.
Yeah. My wife's big on acupressure. She hasn't I don't think she's done it in a while, but she had like a small pack of crayons by on her nightstand, and she would actually find points and press
Oh,
on
I
them
love that.
that way.
That's a
Yeah.
great
And
tool.
the crayons are perfect because they don't make a
Yep.
mess. They don't
Yep.
get on your skin, and they're like the perfect kind of width to,
Yeah.
to
That's
push into
great.
those points. Um, yeah, that's something really cool. Now that she helps me with the editing on this, so now she's probably gonna go back and start doing that again because
Yeah.
we just kind of forgot about it.
I love that. And like there's
Yeah.
specific auricular points that are really good. I'll tell people to use like the pointy end of a pen cap. You can
Mhm.
stimulate those points. That way they're kind of smaller. Um, the end of a makeup brush can be used. Of course, your fingers can be used. There's lots of different like buzzing massage tools and things that you can do. I have an entire playlist on my YouTube channel of the most common big heavy hitter thermostats and DIY acupressure. And then I have a guide in my fertility freebies with a glossary that's like, okay, you're getting ready to do an insemination or you're in your 2 week wait.
Mhm.
Here are the points for that. Also, you have a headache. Here are the points for that. You're constipated. Here are the points for that. So,
Mhm.
there's different layers, ways to use it.
Yeah. So I understand you primarily treat women. So correct me if I'm wrong on
That's
that.
correct.
How often do you find it's not the woman? Do you ever help
Yes.
men with fertility issues as well?
Yeah, I just decided to be the lighthouse of female fertility and trauma, but of course it is absolutely a male factor issue in some cases and
Yeah.
both partner issue in both. I just haven't steeped myself and haven't
Okay.
really gone that route in my own practice. But absolutely, I do couple sessions. So the men that I do see come in together and we do sessions at the same time, and I do differential diagnoses, and then I have different referrals for male factor patients, just people that have the time and the energy to go deep into the all the things that I know the equivalent for the female side of.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it's about a third as far as what the cause is, female, male, both.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you wouldn't want to
Wow, it's a
miss
pretty
this.
even split, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely important, and I think any men listening, uh, a lot of times the burden of the treatment, the burden of investigation falls on the person with the ovaries because our bodies are honestly a lot more complicated and there's a lot
Yeah.
more moving parts. But it is so important to do your part and get the semen analysis, and not because certainly over 20 years I've seen people that are like the female's been doing all these things and then it turns out that there's hardly any sperm or there's no sperm that can swim forward or things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just an easy enough thing to check off the list early on that should be done if you're have been trying for a year and you're
Yeah.
younger, or you've been trying for 6 months and you're over 35.
So fellas, don't just assume it's her,
Yeah.
right? For those
And
fellas
it's
listening.
and I know it's kind of, we get used to these, being in compromising positions with our doctors that are uncomfortable and it can be stressful. But like I said, you can start out with there are mail order ways to test, do really good quality. I'll send you a link actually for semen analyses that are like really high quality, test everything, not just count. some of the Amazon ones are just count, and that's going to miss a lot of other things that could be going on. But there are ways to do this in the comfort of your house. If you're not comfortable going into a clinic, there are ways to just check it off the list.
Hmm. So you do IVF treatments,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah, well, I support IVF treatments. Yeah.
Okay. So how does IVF work exactly? What is it?
Yeah, so IVF is in vitro fertilization. So that
Mhm.
is taking the eggs and the sperm out of the human bodies and putting them together in a lab in vitro, and then creating embryos to place them into the uterus once they're at a certain stage of development. So there's two main components. The first part of an IVF cycle is stimulating as many eggs from an ovary as you can reasonably at one time, and collecting them via a surgery, and then combining them with the sperm and seeing what you get. So that would be a stimulation cycle. And oftentimes now, it used to go right into like whatever they would create, they would put back in the body 5 days later. But more and more now, they're sampling some of those cells, able to tell if they're genetically viable or not. That takes a couple weeks. So they're going to freeze the embryos. And then the second part of an IVF for a lot of people is an embryo transfer cycle. So now you've created the embryos, you've done the stimulation cycle previously, you know what you're working with, and then you do a different cycle to prepare the uterine lining and to sync up the timing as though there was a spontaneous conception
Mhm.
that same month, and then introduce the embryo where that embryo would be coming out of a fallopian tube and getting to the uterus so that it can implant and start a pregnancy. So, stim cycle, embryo transfer cycle, those are the two parts.
And you work alongside the patient just to optimize their wellness going into that whole
Yeah.
process, am I right?
Yeah, so there's a couple big meta-analyses that say that doing acupuncture consistently along the way improves the odds the best. Whole systems acupuncture, which is customized not just a protocol for IVF, but the IVF points plus, oh, you've got a lot of gut issues. Let's do that for you. Oh, you get
Yeah.
migraines all the time. Let's do that for you. So customizing it. And then specifically, there's a lot of research on doing acupuncture around the day that they put the embryo into the uterus. So I go on site to 3 different IVF clinics.
Wow.
So I'm there right up until the embryo gets rolled in or brought into the room, and doing acupuncture immediately before and often immediately afterwards. So I've done that for over 1,000 embryo transfers so far in my career, which is so amazing to be a part of.
Wow. And if you don't mind my asking, what's the success rate?
Yeah, so the success rate, if you look at like the national statistics for acupuncture, or not acupuncture, for IVF,
Mhm.
it is really about a third of IVF transfers result in a live birth.
Mhm.
It depends from clinic to clinic, lab to lab. Lab is a big, big factor. I encourage people to really consider different clinics based on their lab statistics, because people think it's sperm and it's an egg and it's me and my partner, but really the if you're doing IVF, the lab is your third partner, and they can make a big difference. And so, uh, see, now I forgot where I was going with that.
It's
Oh, the,
contagious.
the statistics, the statistics. So, the lab can make a big difference. So a lot of the clinics that I work with are more like 50-50 or 60% even success rate. And then my success rate for live birth is more like 80%. And so I that beats any
Wow.
study that I know of. And that's for people that are doing whole systems
Mhm.
fertility work. And I think it's a testimony, again, to go full circle back. 25% is nursery, and IVF can be so important for troubleshooting and
Yeah.
supplementing imbalances and anatomical issues. But when we create fertility on top of that, the body wants to get pregnant there versus we're trying to force it to when everything else is going off the rails. So
Yeah.
it just is it's good in real time for the person, and it helps the success rate. So I hope by the time I retire in another 20 years, it will be an entirely different conversation that I've helped to lead the crusade on, that this matters. And in fact, there is a study that Western doctors are really buzzing about that just came out 6 days ago that shows for the first time the neural connections around the ovary and how much that can speed up or slow down aging in the ovaries, and that's connected to fight or flight and the nervous system. So all these Western doctors, allopathic doctors, are like, this is revolutionary. And I was
Yeah.
like, I have been doing this for 20 years, which is, Great
Yeah.
and frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. At least they're coming around.
I love it, and I
Yeah.
hate it.
Yeah. And I mean, I really applaud your high success rate just in helping these women, Nicole, because that just is a testimony right there of the impact of the holistic approach, that whole body approach, that whole person approach, and not just focusing on the nursery, like you say, but it's that whole picture. It's so important. And the more we embrace that, the better success we're going to have with our bodies in general, not just fertility issues, you know?
And I know you've talked with different guests about like not getting what you want to. And I think the beautiful thing about a whole person, compassionate, trauma based kind of practice is that it's, 20% still don't have a baby. And that's hard. I
Yeah.
just saw a woman who was just coming out of her first trimester after her IVF, and it was her last embryo. And the pregnancy didn't continue to progress. And I feel so humbled and grateful to be the one person on her team that has been able to support growing her bandwidth to deal
Mhm.
with this grief and supporting her. And it doesn't, of course it matters that she's not pregnant, but like it's not like I'm done seeing her if she's pregnant or not pregnant. And so some of the hardest cases are the ones that benefit the most from this kind of care, because you have to have the clarity to make hard decisions sometimes. You have to have the bandwidth to really grieve and let go of some hard things sometimes in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. Nicole, how can people find you and reach you if they're interested in your services?
Yeah, so everything that I have is on the hub of my website, lifehealinglife.com. So that's as opposed to doctor fixing patient, it's life healing life. And if you go up to the top header, there's an online education drop down. And I am really big about you can get acupuncture, great acupuncture, many places. The ideas and the education from the reductionistic kind of how does IVF work? I've got guides and programs about that all the way up to the big picture. How do you hold lack of control and the unknown? And so all of that is on that tab. And anywhere that, if you speak English, anywhere in the world, people do my programs and get my freebies and go to my YouTube channel. So I'm so honored to get to spread the word with your audience and grateful for the big picture stuff you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. We appreciate it. We'll make sure to include that in the show notes. Acupuncturist Nicole Lange, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for this edition. And you have a voice on this platform. You, our viewers and listeners, you're part of this community, and we love hearing from you guys. So if you've been on a fertility journey and you're comfortable sharing with us, we'd love to hear from you guys. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you experienced and how it went. And you can always check us out at mikecpodcast.com. Until next time, bye, everybody.